Welcome to A Slob Comes Clean, the podcast. I am Dana K. White. I share my personal deslobification process as I figure out ways to keep my own home under control. I share the truth about cleaning and organizing strategies that actually work in real life for real people, people who don't love cleaning and organizing. Thanks for joining me today. This is podcast number 431, and I think I'm going to call it Stretched Thin, Pick a Skillet. So I started thinking about this. We have one of our very favorite people in the world who is currently in the hospital, and it's been really, really challenging and really tough. But uh, catching up and figuring out, hearing what is going on and all that, there has been a lot of swelling. Okay. And the swelling also means that there's a lot of pain, right? And it just had me thinking about like that idea of the pain is worse when the skin is stretched too thin. Not to get medical or anything, because I don't know anything about medical stuff, but you know what I mean, right? It's also the same thing of, if I stuff too much stuff into a bag and it hits against something, or, some sort of sharp thing nicks it, it is going to spill out a lot more dramatically than if it's not stretched too thin by it having too much in it, right? So we have had a lot going on, just the reality of life. I mean, it's nothing bad. A lot of people I know, though, are stretched really thin with things that they have going on in their lives that are very difficult. And it just makes everything feel more difficult. So it just makes me think about that. Like when there's too much going on, something that might not otherwise break, that's normally plenty strong enough, but if it is stretched too thin, it means it could break at any time, right? Like, and it's that whole concept of this. I think about for myself, you know, when I cry, it is often not even about the thing that happened to make me cry. It's often things building and building to the point where I'm just stretched thin. And this last thing is the final straw, right? That sends me over the edge and makes me cry. So it's this idea of when you have a lot going on, then little things become a bigger deal. They become more dramatic, more traumatic, more difficult. And they may be, and so it's, anyway, y'all know what I'm saying, right? So I want to think about that. It's kind of like this idea that, you've seen the memes that say, why is it that my pocket only catches on the doorknob when I'm already stressed out? And that is like so true, right? Like that's the reason it's a meme, right? It's because everybody's like, "Oh, I get it. Yes, that's true." But it's true. Like I can't remember that happening at any time other than when I am already so completely stressed out that it just infuriates me to be walking by this door and my pocket catches and it like yanks me back and I just get so frustrated. And it only happens when I'm already super stressed, right? So basically we're talking about the container concept, right? Like if I try to stick more into a space than can actually fit in that space, then bad things happen, right? And so when I have so much going on, I've got to alleviate some of that pressure. It's the container concept for my brain, my time, etc. Some of it's just natural. It's just certain times of year are busier than others. This is a time of year where a lot of mamas get stressed, right? Maybe we're buying all the gifts. Maybe we're preparing for people to stay in our homes. Maybe it's just whatever. And there's just lots of different things going on to juggle. Maybe it's during for us, it recently was the college move-in time. I mean, three different kids going three different places all at the same time and trying to be there in all the different areas of the country. I mean, it's just bananas, right? So it was a lot. So it meant every little thing that came up felt even bigger because there just flat out was not room for it, right? It can be seasons of grief where you're like, I don't have it in me. the grief is consuming all the space of my mind, my emotions, my feelings, all of that, my time, and there's no room for all the other stuff. And so then little things feel like bigger things. It can be great things like a sports season that goes great or not. It could be, that sports season happens at the same time as the fundraiser that happens for the sport or for other things. It might be Christmas plus hosting plus directing a, Christmas play plus arranging travel plus the food drive plus the car breaks down plus, right? So there's a limit to how much we can do. And the fuller that it is, the more impact and the more pain caused by things that if it wasn't so full, it wouldn't be such a big deal, right? It's like when your toe's already swollen and you stub it, it hurts a whole lot more than stubbing a toe, which hurts, right? When it's not swollen, right? Like, but if it's swollen, all of a sudden it becomes this like, oh my goodness, that's horrible, horrible pain. So, what are some things we can do about it? What are some things that can help to alleviate the pressure, the stretched too thinnedness, which I'll get to the reason why I said pick a skillet. So, first of all, what are some things that I can check off my list without actually doing them? I think that is powerful, right? I have a list. Sometimes it's a inside my head list that's a mile long of all the things that, oh my goodness, I need to do this. And I'm running through that list all the time. It helps me just to put it on paper, first of all, because then it is one less stress because that's not in my in my head anymore. And when I say paper, I really mean a notes app in my phone, right? Like a page in the notes app on my phone. But to write it down means that takes this task of needing to remember it out of my brain. And that's one less thing, which alleviates some of that pressure, which makes everything a little easier. But when I look at that list, giving myself permission to cross things off the list without doing it. That doesn't mean that I am pretending it's done. It doesn't even mean I'm never going to do that item. But for right now, this is not something I can worry about. This is something that I am taking off my list. And it's powerful to remove things from the list just by deciding they're not going to get done. Okay. During this time period, this is out of the question. This is not a thing. And so it becomes that what is actually not urgent? What is not absolutely necessary for me to do right now? So examples might be you're hosting and you had it as an absolute plan that I am going to paint my dining room before Thanksgiving. I'm going to paint my dining room before we host whatever Christmas dinner or just, friends over or my kid's birthday or whatever it was. Like that has been on your list. And so it has felt like that was one of the many things that you needed to get done before this, Thanksgiving dinner or whatever it is. You can actually take that off the list just by deciding now is not the time for me to paint the dining room. I know you might want to paint the dining room. I get it. I completely get it. But if it doesn't have to be done, which I'm just saying it probably doesn't actually have to be done. It's probably something you want to do, but it doesn't have to be done. And if you're already feeling stretched thin, crossing that off the list without doing it, the pressure that relieves is powerful. You might put it on your list for after the New Year. You might put it on your list for another time. You might say, you know what? I think I'm actually fine. I think actually we will do that when we eventually paint the whole house, which who knows, maybe never. But deciding to take that off the list without doing it alleviates almost as much pressure as actually doing the thing. Okay. Now I know it feels like, well, no, not for me, not the dining, but there is probably something on your list that the thing that your list is preparing you for can still happen without doing that thing. You can still have Thanksgiving dinner in a room with paint that you're not crazy about. It's not going to keep you from having Thanksgiving dinner there. especially if that room is full of boxes and you've got to declutter that room and you think you have to paint that room and you think you need to change the light fixture and you want to clean the carpet. Okay. If all of those things are on your list, and so therefore this idea that you're hosting Thanksgiving dinner is completely and totally overwhelming because yes, you have to get the clutter out. Yes, you have to, clean the carpet, but also you got to pick a paint color and you've got to get the paint supplies or find the paint supplies that you had. And you've got to pick out the light fixture. And then you've got to figure out how to change the light fixture if you've never done that before and blah, blah, blah. So it makes the whole I'm hosting Thanksgiving dinner feel so incredibly daunting. Right. And so then when one little thing happens, like your kid's babysitter who you thought was going to be taking them and that was going to be the day that you were going to get a lot done, the babysitter says, oh, I can't actually do that. I mean, like that could be the thing that sends you over the edge. So just to alleviate some of that pressure to keep yourself from being stretched too thin, you can say, okay, I want to paint my dining room. I desperately want a new light fixture in there. And yet those things don't have to be done. And taking those out of the way alleviates the pressure to the point where maybe you're actually able to get in there and get the clutter out, which does have to be done, right? Like if you're going to host Thanksgiving dinner in there, you've got to have the table be clear and there be room for you to get the chairs around. Okay. And you want people to be able to relax in this room. You would love for them to relax in a beautifully painted room. And you think that would make everybody just, but the clutter will actually keep them from being able to even function in that space, right? So just identifying which things can I take off the list because I am stretched too thin at this point. Another example might be cleaning out the back room. If you're thinking, oh, we're going to host Thanksgiving, oh man, I need to get that back room cleaned out in case anybody wanders there or whatever, or it just naturally makes you think I got to get my house under control. And that back room is where your brain goes. Y'all, this is where my 14 days to opening your front door to guests, which if you want to, you can listen to the podcast for free and watch the videos for free. If you want the actual printable guide you through ebook, you can go to aslobcomesclean.com/14, like 1-4. But in there, that's what we do is over the course of 14 days, we start out with all the things we'd like to do. And then as the days go on, we check things off that list and we take things off the list that we don't actually have to do. Okay. And identifying that, oh, this back room that needs to be cleaned out, it absolutely does need to be cleaned out. But I'm going to take that off my pre-Thanksgiving list because that's a door I can lock or whatever it is. That's a door that I can be pretty confident nobody's going to go through. So other example might be, and this one could be touchy, depending on where you are on this, but taking, and I'm not even encouraging this, right? Like I'm not saying don't do this because I think it's wonderful if you do it. But if you have had send Christmas cards on your list for the last 5 years and you haven't ever actually gotten to that, and you're feeling stretched too thin right now, I would recommend that you go ahead and cross it off the list without doing it. Okay. Now, if you do your Christmas cards, I love getting Christmas cards. Like I love people who still do Christmas cards. Like I love it. Right. But the reason I say this is that's built up frustration from 5 years past when you've had it on your list every single year and it hasn't gotten done. And then you put it on the list again this year. So making a decision to say, this year, I'm not going to send them. I'm not saying I'm never sending them again, but this year, because I am stretched too thin, I'm in a season of grief. I'm in a season of excess, things to do. I am in a hard season at work. I'm hosting Thanksgiving where maybe I don't normally do that. All of these things are going on in my life. I am going to take this off the list because taking it off the list on purpose means that I remove that guilt and I say, no, I made a decision. This isn't something where I just know I'm never going to get to it. That's when it still weighs on me, right? But when I take it off the list on purpose, that's when I'm able to actually have that ease of something being gone, something that is no longer pressure on me. It can be when you purposefully take it off the list, it can be as soothing to your brain as having actually gotten it done, right? When you keep just leaving it on the list, knowing that it's probably never going to happen, that's when you've got it on the list. So it's still there. And then you also have the guilt around it and the dreading and the knowing and the when am I going to realize that I never did it or when am I going to finally give up? But taking off the list takes that pressure away, right? From the being stretched too thin. Maybe you decide that, okay, we've always done these Christmas traditions. I'm going to let go of the one that nobody actually gets excited about. Maybe it's the one that you were convinced your kids were going to love. Maybe it's the every year we do such and such. And I'm always like, okay, it's time to do that. And they groan and they whatever. Maybe you take that tradition out and you say, I'm going to declutter some traditions so that I have the bandwidth and the energy and the excitement to do the ones that people really do care about. Now, here's the hard thing with as moms, and those of y'all who have young kids, I'm sorry to tell you this, but we don't actually generally get to decide which things are most meaningful to them. So this might be a case where you say, hey, okay, everybody, this year they're Thanksgiving's like the very, very, very end of November. So I think we're missing a weekend in December, aren't we, or something? I don't know. I'm always like people who understand that kind of stuff and think it all through. Great for them. But I think like December is going to go super fast because like my kids don't go back to college until December 1st is a Sunday. Like what in the world after Thanksgiving? And then they come back in a couple weeks. Um, have that conversation with them and say, hey, which ones are the traditions that you feel are most important so that you can let go of the ones that nobody actually cares about. I know for us, even asking the kids what their favorite traditions are, you might be surprised to find out what they consider a tradition. I did not know, and I know I've said this on podcasts and everywhere else before, but like I remember when my kids were like, "Oh, it's our favorite tradition. We always watch Elf and eat Chinese food on the Saturday after Thanksgiving." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" I didn't even realize that was a tradition, but it meant something to them. And it was because we'd had Thanksgiving food and leftovers and all that. We were ready for something else. And so we'd go get Chinese food and we would watch Elf because that was our favorite Christmas movie. And so we wanted to watch it first. Right. And so that I didn't even know was a tradition. So asking tradition, I can't say tradition today. I didn't even know that was a tradition, but asking your family members, like, what is the most important thing? One thing that my mom will say, especially like back when, my husband was joining our family and my sister-in-law was joining the family. If we'd have somebody else come over for Thanksgiving and she was hosting, she would say, what is the thing that if you didn't have it for Thanksgiving dinner would make you feel like it wasn't a real Thanksgiving dinner, right? So like my family never did cranberry sauce. We just didn't. Like it just wasn't a thing that anybody cared about. But my husband was like, well, we have to have cranberry sauce. And he likes the kind out of the can that looks like the can. So that was important to him. And that way we were able to know, oh, okay, this is what we need. And also that he wants the kind out of the can. And so all you have to do is just buy the can. You don't need to make something fancy for him. Because that if you make something fancy, that's going to feel less like Thanksgiving for him than the kind that retains the shape of the can, right? So what is it that I can check off the list without actually doing it to achieve that same relief of pressure that would happen from doing it, but with so much less effort, right? Okay. And that's immediately something. If you have a list and you can check off two things without actually doing anything, the pressure that relieves may just give you the bandwidth and the energy to be able to do the other things. Another thing might, if we're not talking about Christmas, we're not talking about the holidays, maybe you take, which y'all are going to take this and run with it. I know. But y'all are adults, most of you. So I can say this. Take doing the dishes off the table. Take it off your list. And I don't mean don't do the dishes, right? I don't mean wait until after Christmas to do the dishes. But maybe you say, I am going to get a huge stack of paper plates, paper cups, paper coffee cups. Y'all, I don't buy those things except for, hosting teenagers in my home anymore. I used to live on them. I mean, like before, so back in, I guess, probably 2007, 2008, we always were buying paper plates because we were always running out of dishes and having to use paper plates. When I got my dishes under control, I was like, oh, I actually don't buy paper plates anymore. So we don't use paper plates as a general rule because we keep the dishes done, which, I have many podcasts on just that, right? But maybe you make a decision and you say, for this season, I am going to use paper plates and paper cups because doing that will let me get through this season. That's going to relieve the pressure. You're still going to have dishes to do, right? But this is where the title comes in of pick a skillet. Okay. Pick one skillet, pick one coffee cup, pick one plate. If you don't want to do the paper plates, paper cups, right? But pick those and say, for this season, I'm going to use this one coffee cup. And I know that this is so counterintuitive for people like me, right? Because I used to always feel like I never had enough dishes. And that's the reason I was always buying more dishes. But the reason I felt that I didn't have enough dishes is I was always running out of clean dishes. But the reason I was running out of clean dishes is I wasn't doing the dishes, right? So all that stuff goes together. When I am in a writing season, right? Like when I go away for 2 nights and I go to an Airbnb and I work on a book, work on one of my book projects. My goal is to use one mug for as many things as I can possibly use it for, right? So it's kind of like a game. And it gives me this satisfaction of creativity while also making my life easier. Okay. So, one of the things that frustrates me when I am so consumed and overwhelmed and I have so many things to do is that it feels like it stifles my creativity, right? Like, I feel like I am a creative person and I don't have any brain power to do anything creative. But when I zero in and I say, okay, I am taking the washing of all the dishes except this one off my list. I am only going to wash this one dish. I'm only going to use this one dish. It forces me to get creative. And so I'm like, well, I can eat my cereal from a mug. I can eat oatmeal from a mug. You know what? I can put eggs in a mug. You know what? I can eat soup in this same mug. And so I'm washing that one mug again and again, but I never get overwhelmed because I'm only ever washing one mug. So I've taken all the other dishes off of the list of things that could get dirty. And then I would have to do that. Okay. But it also makes me be creative. I actually kind of enjoy the challenge. Like I find it kind of fun to shake my head and go, oh, actually, I can eat that out of that same coffee cup because I have taken those other dishes off my list of potential things that I'm going to have to deal with later, right? And so using that creativity then also is it jazzes my brain. And that's one of the things that when I'm overwhelmed with so many things to do, I don't feel like I don't get my brain jazzed in that way. And so that helps me not feel so stretched too thin because I am limiting it. It's this kind of weird thing. But the same thing with a skillet, right? Pick a skillet. Pick the easiest to clean, most versatile sized skillet and say, for this season, I am only going to use this skillet. All the other skillets are taken off my list because I'm just not going to use them. All the other pots, pans, everything. And when you start to think that way, then you go back to a time in your life where you maybe only had one skillet and you're like, oh, that's right. I actually technically can boil noodles in a skillet. actually, I can make this, that, and the other in a skillet. It forces me to be a little bit creative in how I'm doing things. It limits the ideas of all the different things I could cook, but that's okay because I'm already overwhelmed and it just kind of, yes, it's limiting, but it's also zeroing in what I can do. So pick a skillet, pick a cup, pick a plate if you need to, pick a fork, and you're like, this is going to be what I'm going to use, and this is it. All the other things have been removed from the list. I cannot have expanding stacks of dirty dishes because I'm just not using those, right? And or pick a skillet and then get paper plates and paper cups and coffee styrofoam coffee cups or whatever it is that people use. But think along those ways, limiting things like that also shrinks that whatever it is that's stretching you too thin, right? I used to think that my constant reprioritizing was bad. Like I have this ability. I mean, I can be in the middle of a thought and my brain will go, that's not important as this. And I will switch over to the more important thing. It can drive certain people, my husband, crazy sometimes. But I used to think, oh my goodness, why am I always having to reprioritize? I'm always having to go, you know what? That thing can wait and this thing is more important and blah, blah. Now I know it's a superpower. Now I know that the reason I've always got a list a mile long is because of my creative brain. And I like having a creative brain. But in order to actually get things done, I need to get things off the list. Okay. So that reprioritizing, I'm just going to celebrate it. I'm just going to be glad for it. Be glad that I'm able to do that. It does help me know what needs to be done, what moves the needle the most. Okay. The more that I understand what is most helpful to do and keep done in my house, and keeping done isn't really a thing. It just means doing the same thing over and over and over. And before it, like my whole thing of if something drives you crazy, solve that problem every day for 7 days, meaning you solve it today and you solve it again tomorrow before it becomes a problem again. You solve it again the next day before it becomes a problem again. And that's how you figure out how to keep something done, which means what is the teeny tiny thing I can do every day that keeps it from turning into a big thing, right? So knowing what has the most impact is so incredibly powerful in this whole issue of getting stretched too thin, just too much going on, too much to do. I'm overwhelmed. So knowing what are the most important things, doing the dishes and doing a 5-minute pickup. We just talked about how to take doing the dishes and making it as small a task as possible by either, making use of disposable stuff or saying, I'm going to limit it down to, a mug and a fork and see what I can do with that, getting down to single dishes there. But doing the dishes used to never be on my list, right? Like it wasn't on my list. I didn't know how important that was, the power of that, the impact of that. And it was just all these different things I have going on, and my house is a total disaster. I don't have time to deal with my house because that's an hours long thing. Now I know, okay, if I can just keep the dishes done, whatever that means for me to do that, then that takes the whole my house is a total disaster off of the list. And that used to be something that just loomed so big and was so overwhelming. I never actually got to it. But just taking my house off the list, that backfires every time. But taking the specifics off the list because I know I'm doing these small things like doing the dishes, doing a 5-minute pickup, if I can just do that. That's why I always say, do the dishes. If you can't do anything else, do the dishes. If you can't even do the dishes, find a way to not have dirty dishes. Okay. So it's not a matter if you can't do the dishes, just let them pile up. No. If you don't even have it in you to do the dishes, you need to find a way to not have to do the dishes, right? What can I get somebody else to do for me? Either because I ask them to do it, and a lot of us who have these struggles are also very independent, competent people who are like, no, I should be able to do this myself. What can I ask someone else to do for me? Or what can I pay for someone else to do for me? Is this the year that I need to buy a turkey? Last year we went to be with my son. He was having surgery over Thanksgiving break. And so we all flew and I got an Airbnb, and I was like, this is a lot. I'm coming in from out of town. I have to get all of my groceries here. I'm getting in at this point. There's the whole thawing of the turkey. There's a million things to think about. I'm not in my own home. And what am I going to have? Blah, blah, blah. And I went, you know what I'm going to take off of the list? Making a turkey. And so I ordered a pre-cooked, it was cooked at the store, I guess. I don't know. I think I got it from Whole Foods. I had an idea to get it from another store, and they didn't, it was too late to order there, but I was able to get that. And I took this daunting task of dealing with a turkey and thawing it in a refrigerator that I couldn't actually picture because I didn't live there. It's not my house. And then I took all that off the table. I took it off the list by saying, this is the thing I'm willing to pay someone to do. Maybe you say, I have so much going on. I was talking about my friends where he's in the hospital. Like Thanksgiving is coming up. There might come a point where I know you're probably listening. I don't know. Hey, I hope he's doing better. But there may come a point where you just say, you know what? I have literally my entire life never even considered buying our Thanksgiving meal. But there's so much going on. I'm taking that off the list by ordering a meal, right? Or even by texting your sister-in-law and saying, can you order the meal? I'll give you the money or whatever it is however that would work in your family. But taking those things off the list by saying, what is it that I can pay someone to do? Do I need to pay someone to, do laundry for me? Do I need to load up some things and go take them to the laundromat that does the per pound or whatever thing? Or I know it used to be called something and they were a podcast sponsor and I can't remember what they changed their name. But there are services that will actually come and pick up your dirty clothes at your house and go and wash them and bring them back. I'm like, that is one of those things that feels like, oh, I would never do that. But when you got a lot going on, you're like, this is something that's actually a small expense that would take so much pressure off of me so that I would feel so much less stressed then because I would know that I have clean clothes, right? What are some things that I can do ahead of time when I'm not in one of these periods of being stretched so thin that are going to make things easier? Y'all know what I'm going to say, right? Decluttering. The more I declutter, the more I'm able to handle these difficult periods. Okay. The less stuff that I have in my house, the less of a disaster it becomes in those crazy weeks where I do fall behind on every single thing. I always say, I'm like, I have so much less stuff now that even in the times where I get so caught up or there's so much going on or just I'm, having a lot of fun working on some project and I completely forget every single thing that I know about how to keep my house under control and how to keep it from getting to be a disaster, even when every single thing in my house is out of place, which never happens. But you know what I mean, right? Like if it feels like every single thing is out of place, it's so much less stuff. And things that are out of place actually do have a home. So they're easy, meaning they have a place to go. I can get right back to where, okay, this is where I need to be after those periods. And just knowing that I'm going to be able to get back to that makes the actual period of being stretched too thin because I have so much stuff going on, makes that easier when I'm like, okay, I know for a fact that I'll be able to catch up easily. Because I can be away from the house. I can do all these things, be at the hospital, whatever it is that you need to be, because I wasn't already behind, right? So in those times where you're trying to prepare for that to make your life one where you don't feel this stretch too thin as much, decluttering is the absolute best way to do that. Some other ideas, maybe pick a uniform and you say, you know what, for this time period, I am going to wear these 2 pairs of trousers and this pair of leggings and these 5 t-shirts. This is what I'm going to do for this time period. And again, like the skillet, it's amazing how limiting that kind of thing and saying, this is all I'm going to wear right now for this time period it's easy to do a quick load of laundry. And I know some of you are like, no, it's never easy to do. But I mean, I'm just telling you, it is a mindset shift when you've limited it down to that. It just doesn't get as overwhelming. And it's also triggering to remind me, oh, that's right. I need to do laundry because the 3 pairs of, I always want to say pants because that's what we say here. But I know a lot of you don't live in the US and pants is offensive. But anyway, 3 pairs because I am going to definitely pick more pairs of undies, right? Which is what a lot of people think of with pants. But trousers, I've got 3 pairs of trousers. And so it's this natural, oh my goodness, that's right. I've worn each of these twice now and it's time. And so it just it's a thing where when I'm constantly just pulling things out of my closet, well then the laundry pile is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more overwhelming. And I'm like, well, I can't deal with that and all the stuff I have going on. And in the meantime, there's less and less in my closet and I'm starting to feel overwhelmed like, oh my goodness, I don't have enough clothes. And then that's how that whole vicious cycle, happens. So picking a uniform, say, these are the things I'm going to wear. I've got 4 dresses that are comfortable and I can throw it on. I don't have to worry about matching anything. That's what I'm wearing for this time period. This is my uniform for this time period. I did have to wear uniforms for a portion of my schooling. And while there's always people who were mad about the uniforms, a lot of us were like, oh, we never have to think about what to wear. Like it takes something out of the decisions to be made. And even if I'm not somebody who sits there staring at clothes and making big decisions about what I'm going to wear, just not having to make that decision, incredibly helpful, right? And here's one last thing. Throw away anything you can throw away. I know that there are all kinds of feelings, and a lot of those of us who struggle with clutter struggle with the idea that, we want our stuff to go live its best life after it leaves our house, right? And I want to donate it to the very best place, and I want to do this. So, whatever your situation is, maybe you take that pressure off of your to do list. Just go ahead and cross out that pressure and say, you know what, for this time period, because I have so much going on, I'm going to give myself permission to freely throw away as much as I can possibly throw away. And I know some of you have recycling requirements and blah, blah, blah. But giving yourself permission to put more things in the trash than you would normally put in the trash or recycling bin if you already have one and it's easy to get in there. Giving yourself permission to trash more than you normally would may take a lot of the, oh, I need to be doing this. I should have been doing this. Oh my goodness, I got to catch up on this. May take a lot of that pressure off. We had some donations at the front of our garage, and our garage door was left open, and they just got kind of like wind and leaves and all that stuff got in this donate box. And I finally said to my husband, I said, can we just throw those things away? And it was painful, right? Like it was very painful. I didn't want to do it, but I was like, okay, but if I don't, then I'm going to have to go, clean these things and wash them because they're kind of like they were in great shape when I put them in the box. And now because of where they were sitting in the garage and the garage door was open, now they're not in great shape anymore. And so I'd have to deal with them to be able to donate them. I was like, let's just throw them away. And it was painful, but y'all, the way that it took pressure off of my to-do list and the impact of having that stuff be gone was huge. Okay. So take stuff off your to-do list by giving yourself permission for this time period. During this time period, I need to just throw things away. Okay. So a couple examples of some things, my daughter and I are the people in our family who love and use our ice maker. And we don't have an ice maker in our actual fridge, but this is like a standalone one. We love that thing. And she'll be coming home for Thanksgiving in a couple of weeks. I'm so excited. But I had started to realize, oh my goodness, this thing needs to be cleaned out. I hate cleaning that ice maker. I know hate's not a good word to say, but I do not like cleaning that iceberger, that ice maker at all. It just, I mean, I know it says that it's push this button and it cleans. I don't see what it does when it does that. So I always end up having to get in there and try to clean it and not know what I'm doing and blah, blah, blah. And it's a huge hassle and I cannot stand doing it. However, I wanted to get it done. And it's one of those tasks that now when I do it, I have so much appreciation for all the things I don't have to do first that I would have had to do first in previous times in my life. Meaning, I was able to just take it over to the sink and pop the little drain doolally and let it drain into the sink and not have to deal with any dishes first because the sink was empty. Because the sink didn't have any dirty dishes in it because they'd just been going in the dishwasher. And then I've been emptying the dishwasher and then putting, new dishes into the empty the dishwasher. I mean, all that kind of stuff is so powerful to realize that the list for that task was only cleaning the ice maker. It wasn't 5 things first before I clean the ice maker. Filling our dog's pitcher. Okay. So yes, we have a hose outside, but you have to kind of walk over here and it's just easier. We have this 1-gallon pitcher that if we fill it all the way, then it fills their 1-gallon water dish outside. And so filling that dog pitcher, I'm thankful every time I fill it when there's nothing in the sink and I can just set it down there because a gallon of water gets kind of heavy, right? And if you're trying to balance it over some dirty dishes, it's a pain. But I can just set it in there and it just makes everything easier when I don't have this list. So I'm not saying feel bad if you don't keep your dishes done. I'm saying, what can you do so that dishes are not an issue? Whatever it is that you need to do during this difficult time, during this crazy talk time, like let's say you're hosting Thanksgiving and that's stressing you out. Okay. So maybe for the 2 weeks, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, you decide, okay, we as a family, we're just going to use our paper plates and paper cups so that that's one thing I'm not going to have to worry about as much. Obviously, there's always still dishes, but I'm going to use one skillet in all these not as creative meals leading up to Thanksgiving when then I'm going to have this big fancy dinner and use my fancy plates or use paper plates for that too, whatever. But see what I'm saying? Right? Like, what can I take off the list? What can I remove so that this pressure is relieved so that when additional things happen, it's less painful than it would be if it was stretched too thin. I don't know. I don't know if that was helpful or not, but it is what it is, right? Okay. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful November and December, and I will talk to y'all next week. Okay. Bye.